And welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most important IU basketball stories from the past 7 days. This is our 71st edition of Assembly Call Radio, and it is our 398th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of Thursday, April 12th, 2018. I am your host, Jared Morris. And let's begin this week how we begin every episode of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
And Indiana is the national champion.
When it comes down, Indiana will be champion.
Smart takes a shot.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
And this week's banner moment occurred on Wednesday when Evan Daniels posted at 247sports.com that Romeo Langford will announce his decision on April 30th, the long-awaited decision, and that he will do so at New Albany High School. Now, the article that Daniels wrote about this and included the same basic general positive comments about the three finalists that Romeo has mentioned before. You know, Archie Miller and the IU staff get the best out of their players. Bill Self's success, speaks for itself, and he's had a number of big guards. Bryce Drew played in the NBA, so he apparently knows what it takes to get there and organizes his practices and off-court routines like an NBA team would. But Daniel's report preceded a flurry of crystal ball predictions flipping from Vanderbilt and Kansas to Indiana. Now, that guarantees nothing, but it does suggest that the way the winds are currently blowing among people who, at least have cursory knowledge of this, seem to be in the direction of Bloomington. And as a lot of people have surmised, it would seem kind of difficult for Romeo to announce this decision in front of everyone at New Albany, have a lot of people there for it not to be Indiana. Now, he certainly could, but again, it would just seem to point in that direction. We will see. As far as what the Langfords have actually said with Romeo's postseason All-Star games winding down, now is when they will actually sit down and really start discussing the decision in depth, though you have to think that at least on some level, the conversations have been ongoing. The fact is, we know how big of a moment it would be for Archie Miller and for Indiana if Romeo does decide to play his one season of college basketball in Bloomington. And frankly, right now, it's never looked more likely than it is at this moment. We will obviously have more on this as we move through tonight's episode. All right, let me now introduce my esteemed co-host for this week's show. To my left, we have one of the world's most renowned and respected bracketologists and the president emeritus of the Robert Johnson fan club. He is Andy Bottoms. Andy, what is your bottoms line this week?
Man, I'm really starting to get concerned. You've got too much time on your hands, but I appreciate the new production elements, and some of the others you shared before the show will be good as well. For me, it's interesting with the Romeo stuff. I feel like I've seen a few people lately, kind of be critical of the way he's handled this part of the process, and kind of criticize him for drawing attention to himself and some of those kinds of things, and I kind of bristle at that a little bit when I look at it, because I think back to all the articles written and the pictures of him sitting there signing autographs and being really gracious with his time for all the fans that embraced him over certainly the entirety of his career, but especially this season. And I guess I look at that and I try to put myself in his position. I try to put myself in the position of his parents. And I guess ultimately I don't know that I see anything wrong with what he's doing. I think he wants to, share it with his community, one that's been really important to him. And as I said, really have, embraced and supported him. And, we can all read into that, whatever we want about that, what that means for IU. But, at a certain point, to me, it's just kind of let him have his moment and handle it how he wants to. I don't think he's been, just doesn't seem like somebody who has gone out of his way over the course of his career and over the course of this year to really turn the spotlight on himself, when I think a large number of people probably would have done that. So for me, let him have his celebration and handle the announcement however he wants. And we're all obviously, waiting on pins and needles, starting to feel good, I think, in many cases about, based on some of the things that you mentioned. But I guess to those who are a little frustrated by it, we've waited this long, we can wait another few weeks, and let the young man enjoy his moment. And it's a really important decision for him. Probably more important than the decisions any of us made about where to go to school and the implications on down the road. So, I think he's just been, pretty diligent about what he wanted to look at. And so as we wind down, whatever the decision, I would like to hope that people will support him and just let him enjoy the moment and celebrate it however he sees fit.
Wait, you didn't announce for Indiana at your high school gymnasium in front of a gym full of people?
Surprisingly, I did not.
All righty. To my right, he is a high school teacher who describes himself as lead learner. He's an assistant coach for Western High School, the founder of the Delphi Bracketology Club, and the host of Talking Hoosier Baseball. He is the coach, Brian Tonsoni.
Thanks again. We'll never forget you, coach.
Coach, it is Tonsoni time. What's on your mind?
I love the walk-up music. That's a big addition. I like it quite a bit. A little nervous there until I heard it, and I do approve. My take is, we're getting some guys and we're getting some looks from some talented players, and that's exciting. Yes, we're waiting on Romeo, and I will second what Andy said. I think it's awesome the way the family has handled it in this day and age of everybody look at me type of stuff. Whoever is the recipient of his national letter of intent is going to be very happy. I think they have a quality young person, a quality player. So that's good. But I'm also looking at the 2019 class, and the vibe that we're getting from some of the 5 stars in that class are pretty positive from the quotes as they start their AAU season and they are getting interviewed and talked to. I think I feel confident in a lot of these talented players coming to Bloomington, and it's an excitement to start seeing the workout videos again. And these guys in every program, it happens. But it's nice to see the guys that we follow in there working hard. And as far as Juwan's, and we'll talk about that in depth, it's always good when players have the ability to go see and talented enough to go see if they can make it in the NBA. And I think he's going to go and enjoy that time. And I think that he will, have a decision to make. But again, we have to like having players in that position. And that ultimately is going to be good for Indiana basketball.
Yeah, no question about it. All right, here are the topics and the questions that we are going to address this week. Obviously, Juwan Morgan announced that he will go through the NBA draft evaluation process. What does that mean? We spend a little bit of time fantasizing about a lineup that includes Juwan and Romeo. And then we run through some headlines because a lot happened both for Indiana and generally in college basketball this week. And so we go through those, and then we answer some of your questions. All of that coming here on Assembly Call Radio. First, a quick suggestion as you go through this offseason. If at any point you find yourself needing some new IU gear, whether you're looking ahead to get ready for basketball season, you want to pick up some gear for football season, you're going to head out to the BART for a baseball game, and you want some gear there, check out the official IU online store. And when you do that, use the URL iustore.shop, because when you use that URL, it will take you to the official IU online store where they have the largest online selection of officially licensed IU gear that you will find anywhere. And when you do that, it's actually our affiliate link. And so we will get a 10% commission if you go there and then purchase something. So it's a way to buy IU gear that maybe you were going to buy anyway. And by using that link, you will also be supporting the Assembly Call because it helps us drive a little bit of revenue that helps offset our costs and pay Ryan's exorbitant salary, which he's not here tonight. There is no truth to the rumor that he's holding out. This is just a routine week off for Ryan. But again, the URL iustore.shop, bookmark that, use it anytime you're looking to shop for IU gear online, and you'll be helping yourself and helping us out at the same time. Again, iustore.shop. All right, you are listening to Assembly Call Radio. I am Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and the coach, Brian Tonsoni. So, guys, Juwan Morgan announced that he is going to go through the NBA draft process. He is not going to hire an agent, but go through the process, get as much information as he can. He said in a tweet on Thursday, "I just want to thank God for giving me this opportunity. And with that, I'm excited to announce I will be putting my name in the 2018 NBA draft. I won't hire an agent, but look forward to this opportunity to do what's best for me." In a release from the school, Archie Miller had some comments, and I thought the last part of his comment was really telling, Andy. He said, "The rules are in place to allow an individual to get valuable feedback, and we support Juwan in wanting to find out where he stands and learn what he needs to continue to work on in the eyes of key decision makers professionally. which just kind of the way that reads to me, it sounds like a coach who kind of assumes that he'll be back, kind of like Robert Johnson was last year, where it took him a while to announce the decision, but everybody kind of assumed he would be back, kind of understood what he needed to work on for the professional ranks, and was there to play out his senior season. That still seems to be the expectation of most of the people that I talk to. What is your take on Juwan putting his name in the NBA draft?
I think it's the smart thing to do for him and really for anybody in a similar position. We saw that with Robert Johnson last year. I don't know that anybody ultimately, thought that he would leave. I think Juwan, there's certainly more a chance that he would than what we saw with Rojo a year ago. But, as you said, I think Archie's comments and I think most things that you see out there would suggest he'll be back. There's obviously a lot of moving pieces of guys who may or may not stay in that can impact that and how well he performs in workouts and those kinds of things. But for anybody who has kind of played their way into that position, I think it would be foolish not to take this step and figure that out. And whatever he decides, he decides. But I think it was inevitable. To me, I was surprised that it took this long to announce anything. I'm not sure when the deadline is to get in. I think you've got some notes on when the timing is to get out.
The 30th, May 30th is the time to get out.
So quite honestly, I was just surprised he hadn't done it sooner, as other guys have announced. And I there's ultimately no downside. I think some people like to come out and have a hot take that some of these guys are wasting people's time by putting their name in because they know they're not going to get. To me, if that's what the process is, then you might as well take advantage of the process. Given there are probably some other processes and things in place that maybe take advantage of the players. So if you've got one that works in your favor, you might as well take every chance you can get.
Yeah, no question about it, Coach. Your thoughts on it?
He had an outstanding year, and I think for one way to look at it, he might be at his best right now at the NBA, and he deserves the right to find that out. And when he goes and plays for the coaches and the scouts, they will tell him, if he has a chance of being drafted. And then it comes down to his decision of, a second round or a free agent in the G League versus playing at Assembly Hall. And again, with some new recruits coming back, will that be better for his future? I think for all of the money that's made in the game and all of the time that these players do, I like this rule a lot. And I think to take advantage of it is the right thing to do. And to not take advantage of it is just missing out. I'm not sure that he is at the level where he's going to be drafted. But again, go find out and then, weigh your options. And, when you have a good year, it's just like Carson Edwards too at Purdue. When you have a good year, you better go and put your name in and see exactly where you're at, because you can come back and have a bad year and your stock can drop, or you can come back and improve that. And you really don't know that unless you go and try. If you've had a good year, if you didn't have a necessarily good year, it might be a waste of time. But I think, Juwan, fans should be happy that he's doing it and that he's in a position, and Archie got him in a position to be considered.
I have to think that most are. And the other thing with a guy like Juwan, who's, had so many injury issues, I mean, as you said, coming off a big season, who knows? Maybe this is the time to strike when the iron is hot. But if he wants to just play professionally, I think in terms of the NBA, he's not appearing on top 100 lists. He's not in anybody's mock draft that I have seen. I think the general consensus is, he probably won't get invited to the NBA draft combine, and that's really the key moment to look forward to now. That's May 16th through the 20th. If he gets invited to that, if you're really hoping that he comes back, you might want to get a little bit nervous, but I would hope that your reaction to that would be extreme joy for him that he would get invited to that. But if he doesn't, then I think that the assumption would be safe that he'd be coming back. And again, the deadline to withdraw is May 30th. So, we will watch that. We'll see how long that goes into the year. But as I said, from Archie's comments, that sounds to me like a coach who thinks he'll have his senior leader back. But again, it remains.
It's always good from a coaching standpoint to get another opinion too.
Yeah.
You've been talking to players, if you have them 2 or 3 years, then they go out and you get an opinion, not from parents or agents or anyone who's got bad vibes around, but you go to the NBA and the scouts, and those are legitimate people, and they come back and they say exactly maybe what the head coach says needs to work on, and now you have an ability to help a player grow even more. So it could be advantageous to the program to send players to get information about a skill that needs to be developed so they're more open upon their return back to campus.
Yep. All righty. Coming up, with current betting odds seeming to favor both Juwan and Romeo being in Bloomington next season, we take this opportunity to properly fantasize about what an Indiana lineup would look like with both of them in it, before any news breaks next week that makes us think that that's not quite likely. So we'll have some fun talking about that. That is next on the Assembly Call. Stick with us.
Well, there's people and more people.
All righty. Can you guys still hear me?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So a couple people let me know in the YouTube chat that there's like a slight delay, a slight lag. This is what I was worried about before we went live. So I'm going to look into the settings of this program that we're using. Thanks to everybody for letting me know. I appreciate that. But yeah, trying to jazz up the production value a little bit here. Ryan has complained for so long about us needing new music, and certainly he's not going to put forth any effort on the production side.
Not my job, folks.
Yeah, we're aware, Ryan. Thank you. I might have taken the liberty of pulling out a few choice comments from Ryan on past shows that we can throw in at some point. But yeah, so we're going to use the offseason to try and improve ourselves. So if there are a few hiccups here, definitely let me know anything that you see. If there's a lag, if something's not coming through right, if an audio drop is too loud, if you think the musical outros are too long, let me know, because I can edit all of that. And we, especially those of you who watch live and who watch on YouTube, they're here every week. We really appreciate you guys' input on that stuff. So yeah, so cool.
When you were talking songs the other day, I sent a couple and didn't want to, litter up your Twitter feed, but then I thought Run DMC, You Talk Too Much, might be a good one for Ryan as well.
So I tried to do that one, but I couldn't find a good clip that didn't seem mean. And I don't know why I was so worried about being mean to him. But I don't know. It didn't feel like it struck the right vibe. It felt kind of mean, and we all know that it would have been appropriate, but I found some other good ones for him. Don't worry. I have several songs that we will rotate through over the next few weeks for him. So, okay. So let's talk about this next segment here. Let me do one quick thing real quick. Let me just listen to the recording that we got and make sure it all recorded well before we start. Yep. Okay, we all came through, so that's good. Okay, so segment number 2. Yeah, so let's hit Jay's question first, and let's hop in and talk about some lineups. Andy, I'll kick it over to you first.
Okay.
And we'll just kind of go through this, and then we'll see how long this takes, and then we've got a couple of other questions that we can hit for the end of this segment. Okay, tell me if you think this is a good question to end it with. I think it would be interesting if you had to pick one. If you could only pick Juwan coming back for his senior year or Romeo for his freshman year, which one would you pick? Thinking maybe we end the segment with that.
Ooh, that's good.
It's a tough one.
Yeah.
It's a really tough one. So we'll throw that in there, toss that out, and discuss that.
Okay.
Okay. So let's do this. Let me get the intro music ready. All righty. Okay. Intro. There we go. All right. You guys ready?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Start it now. You are listening to the Assembly Call. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and the coach Brian Tonsoni. Don't forget, if you ever have to miss all or part of an episode of Assembly Call Radio, there are 2 great ways to catch up. You can subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search for Assembly Call. Or you can join our live Thursday night broadcast or watch the video replays by subscribing to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/assemblycall. All right, so we talked in that first segment about why things seem to be kind of pointing in Indiana's direction for Romeo Langford. We talked about Juwan Morgan putting his name in the NBA draft, but I think the assumption among most people is that he will play at Indiana for his senior season. So we got this question from Jay Horry, and thanks for submitting this, Jay, on Twitter. Assuming Romeo and Juwan are both at IU next season, what do you think the 9-ish man rotation looks like? He said, I think we can pencil in Romeo and Juwan for 30 minutes a game each. Seems like a safe assumption. Where are the other 140 minutes going? So, Andy, just to kind of set the stage here, and then I'll kick this to you. When you look at what the roster would look like next year with Romeo on it, with Juwan on it, in terms of your ball handlers, you've got Devontae, Al Durham, Rob Finney, Romeo Langford. In terms of your wings, you've got Juwan, Zach McRoberts, Justin Smith, Jerome Hunter, and Demezy Anderson, the two freshmen. And then in terms of bigs, you've got Deron Davis, although no one quite knows how healthy he will be come the start of the season. Clifton Moore, Race Thompson, who redshirted this year, and Jake Forrester. So as you project forward, Andy, what do you think the starters would be? What do you think the rotation would be? And it might be interesting to look at what you projected to be at the beginning of the year and maybe what you think the ideal would be for the end of the year, once some of the younger guys have a full season under their belt.
Yeah, it's an interesting group. There's not any, kind of clear people that you take out of the mix immediately. I think the first guy that I would add on top of that is Justin Smith. I mean, to me, he's the, kind of next most obvious one to get big time minutes if you assume, growth from year 1 to year 2 with him. So, once you get past that, gets a little bit tougher. I mean, I think it's reasonable to assume Devontae, but he continued to be up and down. And is he a guy that you're really going to be able to, play a ton of minutes? I think he'd be in that rotation, certainly. Whether he's a starter or not, I guess I would almost put him in the starting lineup by default. And then at that point, it's really a matter of if you want to go a little bit, bigger lineup, in which case you'd probably go with, maybe Race Thompson has the kind of the advantage from being a redshirt and being in the system for extra time, or if you want to go a little bit smaller, then maybe McRoberts is there to kind of set the tone defensively. Although, Al Durham looks like a weightlifter at this point based on the photo that came out this week. So maybe he works his way in there as well. But I guess I would be inclined to say, I guess I'd go Devontae, Romeo, Juwan, McRoberts, and Justin Smith. If you pressed me on a starting lineup, I guess that's what I would go with. But I think it gets more interesting when you start. I think no matter what those guys are in the rotation, if you expect it to be, 9 or 10 men, I think the other pieces get a little bit interesting. But curious to see if you guys would think a different lineup would be there out of the chute.
I mean, that seems to me like the obvious choices for the starting lineup at the beginning of the season. I think you would have to think Devontae is kind of penciled in at the start over Rob Finney, just because of the experience factor. I agree with you. I think, you can write in pen Romeo Langford, Justin Smith, Juwan Morgan. And then it could depend on matchups. It could depend on Deron Davis's health. It's going to depend on how much does Clifton Moore progress. Is he in the rotation? How good is Race Thompson? We have no idea. We've never seen him play. And a guy like Jerome Hunter could be an X factor because he's so talented, but is he ready, to be at a starter level or, in the top 7 of the rotation right off the bat as a freshman? We don't know any of that, which, obviously makes it hard to project forward, 4 or 5 months in advance. But coach, as you look at it, what do you see as, kind of your opening day lineup that you would project forward, and then the guys that you would think would certainly be in the rotation?
Well, I think Morgan would definitely. I mean, obviously, you got guys who are going to start. I think the question, it comes down to McRoberts. He was so valuable this year. Does he deserve to start at the beginning of the year, or is he one of those guys that just comes in and jazzes up the team defensively, hustle, diving on the floor, getting deflections when they're needed? From a coaching standpoint, sometimes too, your starting lineup's not your best lineup. And one of the things when you have depth that you can do, you can mix and match. And you can have some offensive players maybe come off the bench and be, at the 5, 6, 7 minute, whenever you want that first rotation, come in and provide some instant offense. So you might see a McRoberts first and a Smith coming off the bench. And it's about minutes played more than who starts and who comes off the bench. I am very intrigued to see Race Thompson. I have a feeling that he's going to play a lot early, and especially with Duran's injury, it'll be interesting to see how they play that 5 spot. Do they go small and put Juwan Morgan at the 5 and Smith, McRoberts, Romeo, and a point guard, or do they have 4 5s or 4 people who can play the 5? Are they going to rotate those in some fashion? So I think McRoberts starts at the beginning of the year because of what he's done to set the tone, and then fit, around the opening spots at the 1 and the 5.
And the other. Oh, go ahead, Andy.
I think the stuff about the center or playing bigger, I guess I'll use the center position as kind of a proxy for that. I mean, that becomes really interesting because there's none of the four guys that you kind of listed in that spot, like they're all kind of unknowns at this point. For one reason or another, kind of assumed that Duran probably isn't 100% at the beginning of the season, which I think is a fairly reasonable assumption. So that was one of the reasons I didn't even mention him and what I was thinking. But you get past him, you've got Race, who I think, again, will benefit from a year in the system. We didn't see a lot of Clifton Moore. I think there's a lot of unknowns about what he can be. And then Jake Forrester, who is obviously a little bit raw from a recruit standpoint, but might be the kind of rim protector that Archie really wants. So if they want to go big, I could see that happening. I just don't think there's no clear cut. This is the guy that would be the clubhouse leader if you wanted to play one of those guys. And I think that part of it becomes intriguing because you're probably not going to see all four of those guys play if you start whittling it down to a rotation. I find it hard to believe that all four of them would make that rotation as you start thinking about bench guys that you're going to play a lot, which I would assume it would be a guy like Jerome Hunter and would be a guy like Rob Finnessy. I think those guys are going to be in the rotation regardless. And so it just becomes, do two of those four, guys at the center position really work their way in? I struggle to see more than that. So that'll be an intriguing thing to watch.
I do agree that that's probably where the 10th man will be, and in some days maybe not play, and depending on the rotation and the game flow, they move a Justin Smith to the 5 as they did a little bit this year, Juwan to the 5, and take advantage of that. But you do have four guys, and to find playing time, that 5 position, and again, we're at a situation where we're going to start seeing that all of them pretty much short of the point guard are interchangeable. But I am concerned about Duran and his injury and his movement on the defensive end and offensively. But you can do stuff with him, and that's why I say he might come off the bench, come in and feed him into post after we've hit them with a lot of quick offense and shooting, and then we have a post player come in off the bench, and then you can come back. There's a lot of flexibility with that kind of lineup.
And we might not even have the complete information because there's still a scholarship open. So, Indiana could, even if Romeo comes, there will be a scholarship open. Indiana could get a grad transfer guy in the backcourt, could still add a front court piece. Maybe that scholarship goes to Zach McRoberts for the year. So we don't even know that. So that could change the equation too. I still, even if Romeo comes, would love to see Indiana get an experienced guard. Now, you might have to temper your expectations for what kind of grad transfer you can get if it's not a guy who's going to be guaranteed, a certain role or a certain amount of playing time. But if you could just get a guy who's, been a 3-year player, a solid ball handler, a good distributor who can come in and give you 8 to 10 solid minutes, when right now you're counting on the inconsistent Devontae Green, Al Durham, which we're still not quite sure exactly what we have with him, and then a freshman, Robert Finnessy, there's still, I think, a big opportunity there for a guy like that. And so that could change a little bit of this, rotation that we're talking about as well.
That would fit into a 3-guard type of lineup with Romeo really playing kind of like the 3 and a shooter at the 2 and a point guard. And then you got all those bigs, Smith and Juwan and Reese and Duran fitting in those last 2 spots. And the competition's good because it makes people accountable in and out of games and practice.
Yep. All right, you are listening to The Assembly Call. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and the coach, Brian Tonsoni. So, Andy, this question came in via Twitter. Again, assuming we get Romeo and Juwan stays, and you addressed this a little bit last week, but let's just cover it real quick here. Where do you see Indiana ranking in the Big Ten with those 2 guys on the roster?
I think what I saw last week had them, I want to say 8th or 9th, right in the middle. Let's just say in the middle of the pack. I think it maybe puts them in the top 4. I maybe around 4th or 5th. It's somewhat hard to say. I think again, there was kind of a cluster of teams that seemed to separate themselves, at least in terms of those preseason top 25s. Maybe IU works its way into that potentially, but I would say maybe it jumps them up to 4th or something like that. Just kind of guessing. And some of that obviously depends on other guys who stay in the draft that could cause their teams to fall a little bit. But I'd say around 4th, I guess.
Okay. All right. So let's look at it this way. And this question was posed on Twitter as well, and it's a difficult one. I started thinking about it, and it's a hard one. And Coach, I'll go to you first with this. So what if you had to pick one? Like you have to pick only one of these. Juwan stays for his senior year, or Romeo comes for his freshman season. Which one are you picking? And I suppose, criteria maybe is important here. You can look at it either just in terms of next year or in terms of, holistically the impact that it would have on the program. Just, I guess, kind of pick whatever criteria you want. But what's your answer there? Juwan for his senior year or Romeo for his freshman season? Which we assume it would just be 1 year for Romeo.
Yeah, I'm going to go Romeo. And I hate to make that because you want to honor Juwan for what he's done. And if he wants to come back, we're going to take him back. And but the reason is for what you said there, the impact that it has. A local 5-star says yes to Archie Miller. And that impact might last 2 or 3 years and help recruiting down the road. And we need guards. We have Justin Smith. We have Duran if he comes back healthy. We have a Race Thompson. We need a scoring guard either through that transfer or through a Romeo. And if we went away from Romeo, I think we would be hurting at the guard position. So a real tough decision, and one that I'm not really happy to answer because I like both of them and respect both of them and want to see them in the Indiana uniform next year. But I would go with Romeo.
Andy?
Brian pretty much took the words right out of my mouth. I said the same thing. You feel bad sitting here and not saying Juwan. But I think if you look in the short term and the long term, the implications of Langford coming feel, you'd feel the ramifications of that further down the line than you would with Juwan, which I guess it would potentially, well, I guess it wouldn't be a good problem to have because we would ideally like to have them both, but I guess I would lean that way just because of the longer term. In the short term, I think it still might be better just because there's not an obvious replacement for Romeo. I don't know that anybody in the roster is going to replace Juwan either, but some of the skills and stats you could kind of cobble together with what other guys that you have on the roster, assuming they, step up and play well. You don't have somebody we saw last year. You don't have somebody you can cobble together to get what Romeo would bring to the table.
I think Archie could find room for both.
Yes, Ryan, we know that he could find room for both. But the question is, if you could only do one, I agree with both of you guys. And I think, Brian, what you said about just, the impact, of getting a recruit on Romeo's level and the fit, I didn't think about that angle of it. I think Juwan as a senior will be a better college basketball player than Romeo as a freshman, although Romeo will be a more dynamic scorer. I think Juwan would be, more – I would expect him to be more consistent game in, game out. But I think overall, in terms of the impact that it would have on the program, I agree with you. If you had to pick one, that's what you would go with. But as I said, and as we've been talking about, and I think the reason why there's a lot of optimism right now this week is, it does, kind of feel like that there's a better than decent chance that Indiana will have both of those guys for next year. And that's obviously exciting as we look forward to next season. Alrighty, coming up, we roll through a bunch of headlines, including the latest bomb that was dropped by the FBI and why Big Ten fans who don't live in a state with a Big Ten team could start to find it really hard to watch Big Ten games next season. That is next on the Assembly Call. Stick with us.
Well, I lived on the outskirts of town.
Alrighty. That was 14 minutes and 37 seconds.
Oh. Yeah, I think that the grad transfer question becomes interesting at this point because I'm not sure. Most of the guys who are really good at the lower levels are trying to move up so they can play a more expanded role. So could you really find somebody that you'd really put in the rotation for that 8 or 10 minutes that you said? Maybe you could. Maybe you find a guy that just wants to be part of a bigger program that much that you get some of that. But yeah, that'd be interesting. I started thinking about that more with some of the Romeo news, and it's like, well, they go after another transfer who could sit this year and then play in the future, rebalance some of the scholarship numbers and kind of numbers of people in classes. I have no idea who those would be, but there's certainly no shortage of transfers to look at. So
yeah, my goodness, I know.
But we're really short, guards. If you get Romeo and a good transfer, he could be a starter and get major minutes, and then you have Devontae and Finney at the one, and you got Durham. And then you would have Hunter backing those guys up. Maybe that pushes McRoberts a little bit, which I don't know and I don't think will happen. But I think there's a spot for that player at the guard position.
I guess that's true. I mean, if you find the right guy, maybe he could step in and start right away. It's not like there's question marks about.
You got an all-time scorer. You got a great scorer in Romeo who can shoot, drive, score, all of those things we said that we need. You add another shooter with a couple guys who can get to the rim at your point guard, and you have a couple post presence, and you got defenders and rim. That's starting to be a real tough lineup. If Romeo's playing that too, and then we go, then it's still going to be a quality team. But I still think there's room for two and more than 8 to 10 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to, because you already know that Archie doesn't want to play a ton of guys in the rotation. So I think it just becomes, then you start having to figure out who's going to sit out of the guys that are on the roster, and how's that going to go over in some of those kinds of things. Is there, a clear option of a guy to sit? Could you redshirting somebody? I don't know.
Let's pick this up for the start of the third segment, because this is good stuff. We should, and that's a good point, Brian. So let's pick this up real quick. This is better than some of the headlines we were going to talk about anyway. Okay. I like that. So I'll kick it to you, Brian, to kick it off and make that point again.
Okay.
Okay, and then we'll just hit whatever of these headlines we can make it through. Obviously, I teased 2 of them, so we should hit those pretty quickly. Okay. Yeah. Okay. You guys ready?
Yep.
All right. Let me get things together here. Okay. Here we go. All right. Starting it. You are listening to the Assembly Call. Go to assemblycall.com/join right now to learn how to subscribe to our email newsletter. If you want to get more out of being an IU basketball fan, then you need to be on our newsletter list. You will get our weekly 6-banner Sunday news roundups, as well as our post-game analysis emails once the season begins again. It is all free, and it will make you a smarter IU basketball fan. Again, the URL is assemblycall.com/join. So we're going to talk about headlines here in a second. But Brian, you made a really interesting point there in between segments, and I think we should bring it up here because we're talking about the grad transfer. And I had made the comment that maybe now, Indiana would need to look for, I guess, a lesser, for lack of a better term, grad transfer who would be okay, playing 8 to 12 minutes, kind of a reserve guard. But you think there's still an opportunity for a starter level to come in and move right into the starting lineup and play key minutes if you can find the right guy.
Yeah, I think if Archie wants to go, and he's going positionless, but 3 guards, you have a all-time out-of-this-world scorer coming if it's Romeo. He can slash, he can pull up, he can hit the 3. But there's also room on the other wing for a knockdown 3-point shooter that goes with a couple point guards in Finney and Green as drives, and you add a post-up player, and now you have weapons in a lot of areas. If Romeo has to play the 2, then you're a little bit different. I think shooting has been a problem for Indiana. And then the other thing that, freshmen have ups and downs, as we saw with Smith and Durham. We have a good class coming in. They're going to play, and they're going to play well at times, but they're also going to have ups and downs. You bring that graduate transfer in who's been through 3 or 4 years out of school and has produced and hit shots. That's someone that you can rely on to help with Demezi and help with Hunter and help with these guys as they're gaining their Big Ten feet. And so we can win some games. I think there's a spot for, a 14 to 18 point scorer at the guard spot. And I think maybe they're waiting to see a little bit what Romeo does and then maybe targeting something like that. I don't know for sure, but that's something I would probably do.
Andy, are you buying that? And if so, do you have any possible names, of guys that you've seen out there that might fit that bill?
It's fun to think about, and then you got to go to the other part where it's like those minutes got to come from somebody else, and we know that Archie really coming in, and he showed last year he doesn't want to have as deep a rotation as Crean ran. So at some point you start to try to wonder who then becomes the odd man or odd men out, and how does that go over, and that turns into all the kind of roster construction and being able to manage expectations and personalities and all those kinds of things. So I think that's where that starts to get difficult, because we look down and we're all excited about the depth, but some of the guys that we've probably mentioned even already are not going to play that much. So, we talked about the 4 guys in the center position. I would argue one and probably two of those guys on most nights are not going to see minutes. And so you got to start, trimming that out. So it certainly is that there isn't a need for that in my eyes. And certainly shooting was an issue. And even if you could get a steady point guard who had been somewhere for a while to help, groom fantasy or things like that, I think that would be interesting. I just think it then becomes even more interesting, kind of the next domino of who does that take minutes from, and what does that, what does that ultimately mean for the future of some of the other guys that are there. So, not a reason to turn your back on any possibilities that are out there, and there's some good players that have decided to do that. So I think you owe it to the program to explore whatever options you have and let the chips fall where they may once that happens.
And and if we're going to do the Villanova thing too, it's up to the coaching staff to sell. You're coming in your freshman year, you're going to play a little bit, you're going to learn, you're going to be a 4-year guy. That get old, stay old thing, we're going to need you. But right now we're going to, and maybe that's the recipe that's working. And maybe it's an all-out red shirt. And I know it's hard to recruit guys if you're going to red shirt them, and maybe these guys weren't planning on doing that and thinking they're coming in. So, but boy, that Villanova program has got some guys that have come in and played right away, had some guys that have transferred in and so forth. And so, yes, it is tough, but again, the competition raises all, levels of play, and that's going to be interesting. I just think it brings a veteran presence. The point guard thing that Andy said too is nice too, to get Devontae calmed down a little bit. But when you look at people in the roster, you got Devontae up and down, you got Duran coming off an injury. Those are players that we think are going to play a lot. And if things don't work out, you're going to need players to play for them.
Yeah, I think the leadership thing that you mentioned is important too, an experienced guy, because when you really look at the roster, there's a ton of freshmen and sophomores on here and not a whole lot else. So I do think that part of it is as intriguing to me as anything, because really outside of, Juwan, you don't have anybody who's played a ton of minutes. McRoberts obviously played a lot last year. Devontae in spurts played a little bit. And Duran, as we said, you just don't really know. I mean, that's not a lot of experience. So that part of it is intriguing. I mean, there's lots of things about it that are intriguing. It's just, kind of the, how you fit that puzzle piece in, and you got to rearrange some others to do it.
You guys are amazing. I don't know how you do it.
Thank you, Ryan. You're listening to the Assembly Call. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and the coach Brian Tonsoni. All right, let's hit a couple of these headlines. So the latest bomb was dropped by the FBI, obviously ensnaring the Kansas basketball program and the NC State basketball program in particular for apparently
Bags of cash.
Yes, bags of cash that were dropped. I believe with Kansas, it was for Silvio De Sousa, who a lot of people thought was going to go to Maryland. And then, and Andy, correct me if I'm wrong here, but to get him to go to Kansas, they had to, I guess, pay off money that he had taken to go to Maryland, and then, give him extra to go to Kansas. And so, and I don't know all the details of the NC State one, but the Kansas one is the one that is, most relevant, I think, to IU fans, obviously because of, Romeo Langford being recruited by them. I don't particularly think this will impact Romeo's recruitment at all, because I can't see anything happening to Kansas next year, like them getting an NCAA tournament ban for next year or anything like that would affect him while he would be there. So it's kind of a juicy little thing to maybe talk about or think about, but I don't think that would impact the decision. But it is interesting in the larger sense of college basketball, because, does something happen to the Kansas program here long term? Are they stripped of a Final Four appearance of a Big 12 title? So that part of it was interesting, and just yet another peek behind the curtain, another look at how the sausage is made in college hoops.
Yeah, I think Billy Preston was also involved in that for Kansas, who never actually played this year, so that doesn't necessarily have an impact on the Final Four piece. And De Sousa is interesting because he they managed to get him eligible midway through the season. Everybody's hoping he's really going to be able to give them some depth inside, and he had a few moments here and there, but wasn't a big one. But yeah, it was a pretty surprise commitment when he changed from Maryland to Kansas, although it sounds like he actually really did want to go to Kansas. I listened to the CBS college basketball podcast. I thought Gary Parrish and Matt Norlander did a good job of kind of breaking down, this wasn't a case where he kind of was, obviously the money was a factor, but it sounded like Kansas was where he really wanted to go, maybe more so than Maryland. And I think, the Maryland piece and Under Armour in general, is an interesting where they weren't named directly, but obviously, they kind of get roped into this because of what you said, where they had to get money to pay back what they'd gotten from Under Armour to then go do the other way. So they're kind of indirectly pulled into it a bit there. And, NC State, none of the coaching staff is still around at this point that was related to Dennis Smith and those kinds of things. But yeah, it's I think everybody kind of waits for more bombshells to drop, and maybe it'll just be kind of like this, where it's a slow trickle of information that implicates another team or school here and there. But I would agree with you. I don't know that it has a huge impact on Romeo's decision unless more comes out that's to it. But again, most people I think thought, Kansas is getting big time recruits. Josh Jackson was mentioning some of the stuff earlier. They're a big Adidas school. You don't have to work too hard to try to connect the dots to think that there may be something going on there. Then this just provides, I guess, a little more color to what some of those details would be.
It's about money.
Yes, it always is. So did you guys see the story about Comcast, that they have dropped the Big Ten network for people who do not live in states with a Big Ten team? So this caused a lot of furor, obviously, among Big Ten fans like myself, who don't live in a state that has a Big Ten team. I don't use Comcast, so it wasn't really that big of a deal, but it would have been a big deal. But yeah, so I don't know if this is good. This is a sign of things to come, if other cable providers are going to do the same thing, Coach. But certainly something you don't have to worry about living in the state of Indiana. But disappointing for members of our audience, certainly who there have to be, who have Comcast and live out of the area and now won't have the Big Ten network. So that's just a downer.
So have they dropped it altogether, or is it part of like a cafeteria plan where you can add it?
Yeah, it's part of the sports. Well, yeah, it was part of the sports and entertainment package, but now I don't know if it's still going to be part of that, or if, maybe you can get it extra, but you have to pay more for it. But it's definitely not going to be part of that sports and entertainment package anymore.
Yeah, I'm afraid a lot of us with a lot of different providers are going to be hit with those specific fees coming up in the next 5 to 10 years. And it's, you wonder what it's going to do for revenues down the line. And we get a boatload of money anyway. It'll just be less of a boatload of money, maybe. I don't know any of the numbers. But there's a lot of alumni all over the country from Big Ten schools that would really like to see their teams play and appreciate the coverage. And there's people like myself that I'd like to see some of the Pac-10 network or the ACC network, and I'm not available to get that in my area. So it's just a sports packaging. Things are, ESPN's charging for an app now, and it's the way of the world. Some people think subscription stuff's not going to work. The Athletics doing a nice job of getting people in the print area. We're just in new territory. You wonder if it's going to hurt recruiting sometimes too, with team, you're recruiting a kid from Texas and he doesn't see as many games that we're still on Fox and we're still on CBS and so forth. So those are some things. And I think we just got to see how it plays out.
Last little topic here for you. Cliff Marshall tweeted a picture of Al Durham. You mentioned this earlier, looking like he was on the Yogi Ferrell workout plan. IU guards having massive biceps, just a thing. Andy, do we overrate the annual offseason pictures of players making massive, muscle gains, bulk gains, and looking at these pictures?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that doesn't directly translate to better production on the court, but it is important to be able to show more from a recruiting perspective of here's how we can help you get ready for the next level and things like that. So I think it's probably more important than that, but it's like any other sport where everybody's had the greatest offseason they've ever had and in the best shape of their life and all that. You hear that through every level and every whatever else. So I don't know that it means a whole lot to what we'll see on the court, but it's certainly not a bad thing. And I think from a recruiting standpoint, I think that's where it's probably most important. I think I need that as well after the, I'm working my way out of you've watched a ton of college basketball and sat on your couch for a long time. So I might need Cliff to take a day trip over to Cincinnati for repeated days in a row to get me back into normal non-basketball season shape.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. Alrighty, let's move on here to our final segment. We have several questions that you submitted. We will get to those here. One of the questions asks us if we were Jim Delaney, what 1 to 3 changes would we make to the Big Ten's college basketball system that are realistic? So think about that. We'll answer it next on the Assembly Call.
Well, I lived on the outskirts of town.
Alrighty, 13:24 for that segment. So we have 6 minutes and 29 seconds for this one. So about 5:53. Look at that
In
math
the
in the
chat.
head.
Wow, that's you're
In
really
the chat,
getting
getting rid of Delaney.
Yeah. Getting rid of Delaney is the number one thing.
Ding, ding, ding. Brian, you're the winner.
What could Jim Delaney do? Fire himself. All right, moving on.
Segment
Next up.
over.
Mm-hmm.
Just read Brian his chat, and then that segment's over.
So Jamil asked, do we know if Juwan and Romeo have had contact? I feel like the players went to see a game. I thought I saw a picture of like Romeo and Juwan giving each other a 5 or something. Like, I don't know if they text back and forth.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure Rob and Romeo are pretty close, or have gotten closer, I should say. But I don't know who, if Romeo's in contact with any of the players, on a personal level, like he is with kind of the other big name players that he's going around the All-Star game circuit with. So that I don't know.
And it might not be shareable or anything if you do know or whatever, but I saw some tweets, and I forget who it was, that said something big happened, and therefore Romeo might have made his decision. Any idea what that was? And that's why he said the Kansas thing wasn't going to make up a big a decision or anything, but there was a couple tweets, and they're always tweets and rumors, and I take them for what they're worth. But it sounded like, okay, something came up and the decision, boom, was made. He's not going to take any more visits or visit. I didn't know if anyone had heard anything that.
I think the only little thing that I heard was that, that the coaching staff was tipped off in some way that they're sitting in a pretty good position with him. So, I don't know if that came officially from him or what, but that's just kind of the scuttlebutt. Who knows how much to take that, because that's the other thing is it definitely feels. I mean, I think it seems fine to think that things look good for Indiana, but it's definitely way too early to spike the football, considering the announcement isn't for 18 days. Like, a lot can happen in 18 days, and based on all the public comments, they've kind of said they're just now getting ready to sit down and start really, combing through the pros and cons. So. Again, like I said in the banner moment, I have to think a lot of that's been going on already. But I think that's what that was hinting at. So who knows? You might also say, well, if that's the case, why would he wait 18 days then? So it's kind of tough to figure out and read between the lines on all that stuff.
As a fan, I want to get it over with. As a coach and a parent, I applaud how they have done that. It's a huge decision, and it's a private decision, and they have done a remarkable job at doing that. And I think all of the stuff fits. Okay, we set a date. We'll wait to that date. We're not going to leak anything out. It's pretty impressive, because that whole mess gets crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right. Do you guys have some stuff for this Big Ten question? Stop playing games on Monday and Friday night.
I would think, I was going to say protected rivalries. With the unbalanced schedule to protect the rivalries. And
they have some. They announced last year they're going to do some, but I agree more. And then
I just think they have to, if the schedule is going to be unbalanced, they have to have fair scheduling with time off and,
Yeah, mine would probably be mostly scheduling related, and never having the Big Ten tournament. And, no, I'm just kidding. Probably there's some of that, though. The locations of that would be fair.
Bo Borowski shipped off to the Pac-12.
Obviously.
That'll never happen.
Yeah.
Is
there a delay? Is there a delay on those at all when they come through?
No, it comes through right away.
Okay. They got to do Bardo can be reassigned.
Receiving Bardo. Yeah, that's what I thought. That's why I was gonna come in and say something snarky about that's Comcast finally had enough of his nonsense and just get rid of him.
My goodness.
Okay.
Where are the people going to get their Sean Morris dad jokes though? Now,
I was going to mention him. He needs his own show.
Well,
All right.
I think that's safe.
All right, we got five. Andy, talk again. You were cutting out a little bit there.
Yeah, it cut out for a second. Mine's been kind of choppy lately, but I think it's been more on your, like, you have been choppy to me, but I assume you would have said if I was choppy to you. So,
Okay. All right, let's do this. Let's do this. Okay. Trying to mix up the intro music here a little bit.
Just for Ryan.
Yeah, but he's not here, so he'll be here eventually. Okay, here we go. You are listening to the Assembly Call. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and the coach Brian Tonsoni, wrapping up another week talking IU basketball. Gentlemen, we have a few questions that were submitted by Assembly Call listeners. Best ways to submit questions for the show, go to Twitter at Assembly Call, or people also submit questions in our Slack channel. If you're interested in joining our growing Slack community, just shoot me an email, jared@assemblycall.com. Okay, so here's the first question. This is from Robert. If you were Jim Delaney, what 1 to 3 changes would you make to the Big Ten's college basketball system, in quotes, that are realistic? And he says, I'll let you and your co-hosts and guests define what's realistic and what's not. Brian, I'll let you hit leadoff on this one. What changes would you make to how the Big Ten handles college hoops?
I'll go real quick here. And I think more protected rivalries to see traditional play. I would like to see fair scheduling, and I think Andy agrees with me and might talk about that. And you know, we joke about officials, but can you make officials' ratings public or something like that? Because there are a few officials that we would like to see reassigned.
You want to name any names, or you want to keep that?
It starts with Bo
and ends with Borowski.
Objectively terrible.
It's true,
and that's my answer.
Okay. It's a good answer. Andy?
Yeah, I think the scheduling one is a big one for me. And I don't know how, the Big Ten's obviously experimented with, divisions and all that kind of stuff. I don't know that any of that's ever been all that successful. It certainly works to IU's detriment in football. But if you could do that, would that help the schedule be a little bit more consistent year to year? That the thing is always, you never really know when these, single plays come out, and how that all gets decided is always shrouded in mystery. So I think that's one that for me would be good. The scheduling piece that Brian talked about as well, just with the days between games, that was a huge thing last year. If they're going to continue to play the number of conference games on these, odd nights of the week, to have some equity in terms of which teams have these quick turnarounds and the second one's on the road, try to level the playing field a little bit from that regard. And then I think, like most fans, Big Ten tournament being in some alternate locations the last couple of years, I think by most accounts, it went over better in New York City than a lot of people would have expected. I think part of that is just the mystique of Madison Square Garden and those kinds of things. But I think most people would like to see it held more, centrally in the Midwest, where it's been the majority of the time.
Is it reasonable to ask for better announcers for Big Ten Network games? Like, Crispin, he's great, but, some of the other guys, Bardo.
Yeah, Sean Morris. Yeah, I don't know. Those guys may be at the root of this Comcast thing in the end. And if Comcast manages to strong arm them into getting rid of some of these guys, then bravo Comcast, and any negative things that we've said about them, we'll take back immediately.
That's true. Okay, next question. This comes from Scotchy in our Slack channel. And it's basically asking, what do we do with the other scholarships? So with a large incoming freshman class, including Race Thompson, whether Romeo commits or not, I say bank the scholarship until 2019. There are 3 to 4 great gets possible, in his opinion. So, we've covered this a number of times, but I think it bears mentioning again. I think what you want to do with that scholarship is you've got 3 options. If you can find a 4-year guy, maybe a guy that decommits somewhere else and you just absolutely love him, fine. But you better make sure, if you're going to make a 4-year commitment, that this guy is going to be able to play and contribute at least as an upperclassman, because we've seen too many scholarships in recent years, get tied up in guys that, never develop or end up transferring out. And it just creates all kinds of roster instability. So if you're going to do that, you better be sure. And I don't anticipate that option coming. So I think you either go with a grad transfer who's only going to tie it up for 1 year, and then it's free for Trenton Watford or for Trace Jackson Davis or Keon Brooks Jr. or any of these guys, or you give it to Zach McRoberts. And same thing. Now he's kind of, he becomes that guy. He's a senior. He'll be graduating. And so the scholarship stays open. So if you're going to give it to a 4-year guy, he better be on the level of Trendon, Trace, Keon, DJ Carton, some of those names at the top of the recruiting list that Indiana's going after. I assume that you guys agree with that, yes?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you can't get yourself in a position where you have this huge bubble of guys. So I think that almost automatically rules out another freshman. I don't think there's anybody out there who's not committed that would be worth running that through and then having this bubble of, 5 guys that you're going to have come through at the same time.
Unless everything explodes at Kansas and Quentin Grimes decommits and Romeo wants to bring his good friend to Bloomington. But again, probably not going to happen. Okay, then this comes from Richard. He said, earlier this week, Ryan Phillips wrote about the top 15 coaches. Archie was number 15. He had him 15th. Chris Holtman was 14th. I thought that was wrong. I think Archie's a better coach than Chris Holtman, but whatever.
Where did he have Coach K? I did not read this. Post.
That is a good question.
He's a great coach.
Yeah, we know how you feel about him.
He was third.
Yeah. So the question from Richard is, I want to know if the list had been the top 16 coaches, would Alford have been number 16? Since Ryan always says that he can't make it past the Steve 16. So I suppose that is a question that we will have to wait and ask Ryan when he's back on the show. We have about 10 seconds left, Andy. Any other hot takes from Ryan's list?
No, I think the answer to the question asked, though, would be a resounding no.
Yes, I agree. All righty. That will do it for us on this week's episode of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live and be part of the live chat, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. Or you can always subscribe to our podcast by searching for Assembly Call wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to go to assemblycall.com/join and join our free email newsletter. Thank you for listening. We will be back to talk IU hoops again with you next week. Until then, keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim. And go Hoosiers. Sweet. I got a little off sync with my audio there. It didn't start right when I wanted it to. So we're going to learn this new system.
It's awesome. I like it quite a bit, especially hearing Ryan's little remarks in there. But I do think, as a guy who spends a lot of time in a chat room, I do think we need to have a chat room award for the best line or two. Brian Toohey or Toohey. I'm going to butcher your name. I'm
Toohey.
Sorry, but Toohey. Awesome. He has 2 of them today. I think he's the award winner. He also said a 500-mile restraining order for Danielle Marshall.
Oh, my goodness, yes.
Or Delaney to do that.
Oh, my goodness, yes.
I mean, so Brian, mad respects. I wasn't able to hang out in the chat, but I'm giving you an award. I don't have anything to give you. High five.
So, okay, so this is going to be just a little gift for everybody who's still hanging out here and for you guys, because I think that you will enjoy this. So I put together a montage, like, being on the show as you have. Number one, we love Ryan, obviously. Let me preface this by saying that. We love him and we respect his work greatly here on the Assembly Call.
You don't speak for all of us, but all right, continue.
Couldn't even get through that without laughing. But he has a high opinion of himself at times. He does tend to, use a lot of I statements. So I went through, just as I was kind of putting some of this together, this is literally only from like 3 or 4 episodes. All right. So I'm just going to play this. That's all I'm going to say about this. But this is, and there may be more of these to come, and we'll play it on an actual episode, like in the podcast. We'll just leave this for the YouTube folks. But this is the very first ever Ryan Phillips bragging montage. So here you go. Give it a listen.
I was the Indiana Daily Student's basketball columnist.
I pretty much have an opinion on everything.
My apartment complex has a bowling alley in it. 4 separate people texted me. I have to exercise. I wrote about it a little bit this week. I cleaned up every single crumb. I got to do a 45-minute workout. I may stop by tonight. I'm working. I have to do the radio show. I was flying to Connecticut. I've stayed everywhere in that damn town. I'm like a jazz musician. I'm just going to go. I got in touch with some people at Duke. I've never changed a diaper in my life. I have friends who are like, hey, man, I'm taking the day off from work to like watch games. I have more UCLA fan friends now on Twitter than I've ever had in my life. I love them all, by the way. This happened legitimately 3 feet from me. I know the story. I don't think the audience does, though. I certainly could curse. I was sitting on the floor right there. I could see everything that was going on. I'm going to trademark fake news. I wrote about it a little bit this week. I was at that game on the floor, off to the side or something. I do it all the time. I had one show where I had Skype shut off the entire, like pretty much the entire time. I was a USC football fan because I was friends with some of the players when I went there. I went to the national championship. I went to the Final Four when it was in Indianapolis in 2015. I'm stuck in my house all day because I work from home. I'm going to go on vacation that week. I will be at Petco Park.
Well, I've been saying all year that I have been hearing out of Bloomington that Noah was on a 2-year plan.
I don't know why, but I just felt that. If you don't agree with me, that's totally fine. You can be wrong. That's fine.
So there it is. The first ever Ryan Phillips bragging montage. There will be more of those. There will be more of those. Yes. All right. Good show. Good show, fellas.
All right.
Thanks for having me.
Always. No, thanks for filling in. I think Zach will be on here next week, so we can figure out, Andy, if you need the week off or.
Yeah, I actually do. I'm out of town the first 3 days of the week, so I'll be kind of shot by then anyway. So
okay.
I was going to tell you to think about who you might want to get. So
there we go.
That works out perfectly.
There we go. Oh shoot! I forgot. I got this clip to use at the very end of the show, and I forgot to play it.
Thank everybody for coming out.
But we can left it out of the podcast. Anyway, we'll see. Get comfortable with the soundboard and see how we can get some of this in here and liven up the proceedings a little bit. Thank you everybody for the comments in the chat. Always much appreciated. And I'll look into the latency issues and see. Jamil asked if there were any Bob Knight clips. Right now, I only have one.
If you just gonna let him drive by it.
I need to find some other ones for him. Okay, last one that I'll play for you real quick. This I actually found this looking for some Bob Knight clips. But just picture this the next time that Ryan goes on a rant about Coach K.
Ma, he keeps calling me these names.
It was such a random conversation when that popped up. Anyway, I had a little bit of fun putting that together.
Nice.
All right, gentlemen.
Okay.
Good work. Thanks, everybody, for being here. And we'll talk to you next week on another edition.